I'd like to introduce a panel discussion that will begin. And first of all, I'd like to welcome Mark Gaines. Mark is with the Washington Department of Transportation, and he's had a long association with WASHDOT and the research and work that they've done in the state. David Paul on the left, the Senior Technical Advisor of Dams and Levees for HDR. But we all know Paul Dave because he's spent 42 years with the Army Corps of Engineers in dam safety and has given us many talks over the years. Silas Nichols with Federal Highways Administration, and he's the Senior Geotechnical Engineer responsible for leadership and direction of the national team and the development of all their technical capabilities and policies. And finally, Pollyanna Cunningham. And Pollyanna is the Marketing and Brand Communication Director for International Construction Equipment, and she's in North Carolina, and she's also the PDCA's Communication Director for 11 years, and she is the Chair of the Driven Pile Committee for the DFI. So I believe that Silas, so you may be first. I'm not sure. Mark is first, my mistake. So let me get this started for you. Thank you. And if you have questions, please use the microphone so that our friends on the webinar can hear. Thank you,
Mark. Well, thank you. I'd first like to thank DFI for inviting me here today. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm going to share today what the Washington State DOT has done to collaborate with industry partners. And really, my goals out of today's presentation is to share how it's benefited the state of Washington in our construction program and our bridge program. And hopefully, if you're, whether you're an owner out there or a contractor or an engineer, hopefully you can take something away here and maybe look for ways that you could also collaborate on the projects you're working on. So WASHDOT has about a 25-year history of teams that work with a variety of owners or a variety of industry partners. Here's an example of the sort of teams that we work with. And these are primarily run out of our state construction office in Olympia, Washington. There's other partnerships, but the ones that I'm familiar with, I spent 15 years at the construction office, so I'll talk mostly about these. And considering my present company here, I'll primarily focus on the ADSC task force. I won't go into the pavement stuff too much because that wouldn't be very interesting for you, I'm sure. So these teams are set up to basically look at areas where engineering, construction, and contracting and design all come together. And really to make sure that when we're doing things as an agency, we're doing things which work for all these groups, because when it comes down to building projects, we're all partners in this, and we all want to be able to deliver the best project and deliver it the most economically. A little bit of history on how we got started on this. I know the text here is probably a little bit small, but if you look at the origins of the association that WASHDOT has with the Association of Drilled Shaft Contractors, it goes back to about 1994. WASHDOT got really involved in drilled shaft foundations at that time, and we had a number of projects that we tried to deliver. And what we found was the cost for change orders and cost overruns exceeded the original bid price for our drilled shafts. This happened on about 4 or 5 projects. We got to a point where we issued basically a moratorium on we wouldn't allow any more drilled shaft foundations to be built. And this is kind of a letter that Jerry Weigel, the bridge construction engineer at the time, issued saying, don't do shaft foundations anymore. And in this, they had already started the collaboration at that time. They had worked with the ADSC to establish this task force and really to review how WASHDOT is contracting for drilled shafts and find ways that we can improve our practices and hopefully bring the cost of drilled shaft foundations down. So that was the origin. It's been about 25 years now that we've been meeting with the ADSC. Typically we meet generally about every 2 months or so about 5 meetings a year. I thought I'd go over a little bit, how we approach things and what the meetings consist of. So I think one of the most beneficial areas we work on right now is constructability reviews. Almost every meeting has between 1 and 3 projects where we have the designers come in and share about their project and really ask for advice from the contracting community. We know what we need from a design side, but oftentimes making sure that what we're designing is constructible is something that we as designers are a little bit weak on. That's where it's been huge to have the ADSC membership there. They can take a look at stuff like, should we specify an oscillator or rotator for the project? What should the casing limits be out there? Are there any concerns with trying to socket into rock? All those kind of things. We get great feedback from the ADSC on. We've saved tens of millions of dollars in revising our design to make sure that it's constructible. One thing that you need for this to work well is you need to have drill shaft contractors that are willing to sort of speak their mind. From my experience, they're all kind of like open books here, so we have no problem getting them to share their input on our projects. We also spend a lot of time on specifications and policy. When we first started the task force, that was the main focus, and it was really getting the risk we have in our contracts and making sure that it's really appropriately divided. The state needs to take some risk, but we want to make sure we're not putting too much risk on the contractors. I think over the years, our drill shaft specifications have become pretty well streamlined, and even though this still is a main part of our meeting, we spend less time on this now than we do on other areas. We spend a fair amount of time on research in these task forces. You heard earlier today from Don and Amy about the concrete-filled tubes for shaft foundations. Stuff like that is always taken through the ADSC WSHDOT task force. Obviously, they involve a lot of things that drill shaft contractors don't usually do, like AWSD 1.1 welding out in the field and those kind of things. So it's huge to have them working with us to make sure that the research is headed in a direction that can actually be built in the field. Otherwise, it's just research that sits on a shelf someplace. And finally, new technologies. We were one of the early implementers of the thermal integrity profiling, and we worked very closely with ADSC during that to make sure that the specs we develop for thermal integrity profiling work well, are constructible, and all those sort of issues. That's always a part of our meeting, is to make sure that if we're approaching something new, that we're getting buy-in from industry on it as we move forward. And we also do a lot of advocating and promoting best practices. For example, typically every 2 years we hold a drilled shaft training where we invite kind of a broad group of owners and engineers and contractors together. We have great attendance to that, usually about 130 people. It's very low cost and it gives a chance for industry to work together with owners and with engineers. So here's the main goals. What we accomplish out of this is we really strive for a common understanding of what we need on our projects. I think through this collaboration, the drilled shaft contractors understand the design needs we have to have, and on the other hand, the designers really understand what it takes to make something constructible. Oops. Sorry about that. We also balance contractual risk. When we basically shut down drill shaft construction, it was because we were trying to make the contractors responsible for all obstructions on the job site. I think early on we realized that that's not a good place to put our contractors. So we, I think, now have a very fair balance of the owner taking risk where we should be taking risk, but passing appropriate risk on to the contractor. We also try to get industry buy-in on the work we do, and we want to make sure that that they agree with the approach we're taking, and if there's anything that we're trying to put out there contractually that doesn't work for them, we have a good discussion about that. I think we have a lot less disputes on our project now as a result of this collaboration. And in the end, this work we do saves everybody money, and fundamentally we're spending taxpayer dollars out there, and we all have an interest in making sure that we're getting the project we want without excessive costs on our project. So one of the common questions we get, this is kind of a unique relationship. We get a lot of questions about whether or not it's legal for us to have this kind of relationship with industry. And this isn't just for the ADSC, but we also have similar meetings with the Association of General Contractors and the paving associations. So when we first started on this approach 25 years ago, we had our Attorney General's office take a look at the relationship, and they found that we were on pretty solid ground here. Here's some of the things that they considered when they looked at this. We are dealing only with trade organizations here, so we don't ever have individual discussions with specific contractors. It's always through a group like the Association of General Contractors, ADSC, Washington Asphalt Paving Association. So as long as we're dealing with trade associations, it helps prevent any sort of direct one-on-one discussion between us and the contractor that would provide an unfair advantage for that contractor. We make sure we stay out of specific contract discussions here. We may take learning experiences from past or current projects and look at spec changes, but we never get into the specifics about a contract when we're having these meetings. We also make sure the meetings are open to everybody. These are not advertised public meetings like you might see for a city council. But if we have somebody that's interested in what we do, they're always welcome to sit at the table and hear from us. Never an issue for us. And the minutes are public records as well. So once we get through a meeting, we post all our meeting minutes. There's a link at the bottom there that you can write down if you want. That has meeting minutes not just for our ADSC WASHDOT task force, but for all the meetings, all the industry collaboration meetings we have. They're all posted there. So anybody can look at them. If they have questions about it, there's contacts on there they can call and get more information. And that's all I have. I think David's next.
Good morning. Thank you to Matt for the introduction and for DFI for the invitation to participate in today's panel discussions. I'm going to summarize my comments into two primary areas, one from a federal owner perspective. As Matt indicated, I recently retired from the Army Corps of Engineers, and so I'll have a few comments reflecting that, and then focused on DFI and some of the engagements that we're involved with representing DFI to other entities around the world. With respect to the Corps of Engineers, the Corps has been the military's and the nation's engineer for over 250 years. It is represented in 9 divisions across the planet, 45 districts, and over 35,000 employees working in 100 countries. It has over 300 individual pieces of critical infrastructure that it is responsible for operation and utilization. The represents over 715 dams across the United States, particularly along the Columbia and the Missouri main stem, 15,000 miles of levees, over 250 navigation structures. In addition, the Corps is responsible for maintaining the ports along the coastline in the United States. On the planet Earth, I'm not aware of another organization that has such a portfolio of infrastructure that it's responsible for, and certainly you can all appreciate the significance of that to the economy of the United States. The Corps has spent the last decade putting a lot of energy into assessing the status and condition of the infrastructure portfolio, and they are very clear and have clear assessments of the conditions of the dams, levees, nav structures, and the ports. And the deficiencies have been compiled and equal somewhere around $100 billion worth of investment to bring those structures up to current standards. I'm very encouraged by the conversations this week between the administration and the Congress and starting the dialogue about infrastructure, and the figures that have been reported are somewhere around $2 trillion. That's a significant investment, and again, I remain optimistic that the Congress and the administration can move forward expeditiously with those conversations and hopefully funding. The Corps will have a forum in Washington, D.C. on May 15th, and DFI will be participating in that. In the last fiscal year, they received $20 billion of supplemental funding from Congress to apply to ongoing remediation and construction projects. Switching now to some of the outreach programs and activities that DFI is involved with. DFI India is a chapter of DFI. They have been in discussions with the Chennai Metro Rail project. Chennai is the fourth largest city in India. We're having discussions about helping and assisting with phase 2 of the project. The first phase is essentially completed. It was 45 kilometers of above ground rail in and around the city of Chennai. Phase 2 is underway. They've begun characterization activities and design activities. Phase 2 will consist of 120 kilometers, 124 stations along that route, and will be primarily underground, so very challenging project. So from a DFI perspective, to be able to provide technical assistance and be a part of their planning and characterization activities will be very significant. In addition, DFI has been working closely in the last several months with the City of Toronto. They have been engaging DFI and looking for technical assistance, primarily from the membership associated with development in and around the City of Toronto, primarily looking for advancements in technologies that will help with the water tightness of the foundations associated with new construction ongoing there. Lastly, back to the Corps of Engineers. They have, related to the dams and levees in their portfolio, the Corps has been working on and developing a new engineering manual focused on seepage cutoffs for dams and levees, essentially cutoff walls. DFI has been an integral part in the development of that new manual, which is over 650 pages, and it's in its final phases of editing, and hopefully before the end of this year, the Corps will be able to issue that to the profession and to the industry. DFI has provided significant peer review of the various chapters, and it's certainly been instrumental in improving the quality of the document and the information that's contained. Thank you.
Okay, I was asked to take a few minutes and talk a little bit about the National Geotechnical team at the Federal Highway Administration, and then try to frame our interactions with industry also with respect to how we deliver our programs, how we do our work, how we make decisions on what impacts transportation geotechnics and the discipline overall. And so I'll start by just talking about our team. We are a really, really small group. We are approximately 30 people total. The majority of those people sit in our federal lands offices. We have 3 of those that function more like a Department of Transportation than anything else. What most people in this room would be more familiar with is our federal aid side, which right now has 8 subject matter experts. And if that doesn't sound like a lot, it really isn't, considering that we are sitting on approximately 4 million lane miles in all of its subgrades, some 610,000 bridges, and millions of square foot of retaining structure around the country that to try and figure out how to deal with, both from a repair replacement standpoint and just from an operation standpoint. And so we maintain a strategic plan that essentially guides us year to year. We get together once a year. This year we'll get together in Newport Beach in June to talk about how we will start to inform what will be our annual spend plan to attack what we think are current needs and address what we think are future needs. And so our federal aid side works in 3 areas. It works in policy and guidance. That would be my office and headquarters. It works in training and technical deployment. That would be our subject matter experts that sit in our field offices in the resource center. And then we do have an active research office that actually functions under our strategic plan also. Our strategic planning process for the 8 of us is really what you see with us. It is our industry sort of interaction. We are informed by what we are doing day to day, by what state departments of transportation are doing and feeding back to us, what our division offices are feeding back to us. But we are also greatly influenced and informed by what goes on in industry and what goes on in academia. And so we could talk about what those interactions, the broad interactions we have with industry actually lead us to. It's a really diverse program that influences a lot of things that you see every day. And so at FHWA, that gets to how we actually develop and identify and develop research. It looks at how we make decisions on which guidance documents, GECs, that we're going to update at any given time or develop from scratch. It gets to our partnerships with AASHTO. And how AASHTO actually goes about making decisions on code updates and code maintenance. It gets to our partnerships with NCHRP and how we go to TRB once a year to talk about, as an industry and as a partner with FHWA, how we would identify research needs and get those moved forward. And finally, it works with our partnerships with the state departments of transportation and some of the other transportation agencies who do a lot of research on their own that are at times informed through work that the Federal Highway Administration is doing. And so the types of things that we find ourselves influencing, the state of practice, the state of art, of just all that we do, a lot of our innovations and advancements in practice over the last 20 to 40 years. For those of you who were at IFC and saw our panel on 50 years of FHWA last year, you saw that we were able to identify advancements in about 10 different areas that we thought really impacted the way that the geotechnical discipline has evolved over the last 25 to 50 years. Construction means and methods. We have to come to industry to sort of figure out what it is you guys are doing, how you're innovating, where you're advancing, so that we can, in fact, find ways to actually accommodate that in guidance and in support. Quality assurance, technology gaps, research needs. All of these are areas where the information coming from industry and our industry partnerships are vital in how we make decisions. And then finally, policy and specification feedback. Well, I could tell a story here, but I think I'm going to stop instead of going over 5 minutes. But just know that last night in the bar, I was actually yelled at by somebody for something that we wrote recently, and that happens to me 4 or 5 times a day. Thank you.
Oh dear. Good morning, I think, or afternoon for those of us on the East Coast. I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit about the PDCA and how it interacts with the theories at DFI with Common Ground, what the Pile Driving Contractors Association has accomplished over the past few years, understanding how we're looking to partner better with them and how we can make some things happen. So I think the best thing to do is to start with a little bit of history. And actually, it's a pretty big history going forward. The PDCA was actually built by partners that supported driven pile contractors. And basically today, the PDCA, as most of you know, stays very, very true to the driven pile market. But at the same time, they've always acknowledged that most construction companies and sites are constructed in partnership. And I think that's where DFI strengths come in with their whole Common Ground. Beginning in 2005, the PDCA began a partnership with the T15 committee to assist in and review recommendations of the AASHTO design specifications. The T15 committee and substructures, the retaining walls, is composed of 11 representatives from state highway departments, plus 1 from the FHWA. In 2005, that member was Jerry DiMaggio. Today, as we all know, it is Silas Nichols. After 3 years of meetings, which included visits to meet with the T-15 in Ohio, Washington, Utah, Nebraska, Louisiana, and then finally back in D.C., a consensus was actually reached. And in these 4 years, they, with encouragement from Jerry and Silas, the partners grew and learned how to appreciate each other's perspectives. They began really having intellectual communications on improvements instead of arguing. Around 2007, the PDCA formed and successfully executed a secondary partnership with this T-15 as a free resource in rewriting all the driven pile installation specifications to make them current and a lot safer. By July of 2009, PDCA actually formed and successfully, the T-15 Collective was accepting suggestions based on proven best practices and industry expert testing. The PDCA technical committee members partnered with the T-15 and impacted many changes in sections 10.5 and 10.7. These things included, do we have that up there? There we go. Okay. Revisions of resistance factors to reflect the degree of assurance testing, the use of the wave equation in dynamic testing as an alternative and or to static testing, the removal of the possibility of having safety factors as low as 1.53 and as high as 4.2. And removing, which if you guys are not aware, the technical committee chair for the PDCA is Dale Biggers. So he is my coach and mentor on this little talk with you all. And he let me know, he had some choice words for the next section here, but removing the confusing site variability table from the specifications to the commentary, so it is no longer mandatory. And I'm sure you all have questions about that going forward. It is now optional due to the difficulty in interpreting it. Around 2009, so we're getting closer, and I promise I won't take you through every single year, but AASHTO reviewed these documents used by the state highway departments, the T-15, and adopted changes to the 10.5 and the 10.7. There is also a similar version, which is floating out there if you guys are not aware, for the private sector. In 2010, PDCA assisted the Louisiana Department of Transportation to begin revising their standards for vibration monitoring. And then by 2013, they were asked by the Louisiana DOT to rewrite the driven pile specifications. I guess this all leads us to what are these groups doing and why are they working together? I just gave you a list of a history of PDCA, but there's more to it. There's all the folks in the Driven Pile Committee at DFI. There's all the folks from various organizations and committees that are coming together to work together. And I think one of the best examples of that is moving forward with the IBC codes. So right now, starting in 2012, they began a collaborative effort with the DFI to improve the IBC 1810 foundation section. This project is continuing to gain strength, again, via these partnerships, and they have called themselves now the 1810 Geo Coalition Code Committee. These partners on this code committee come from some of the strongest groups in our industry. 37 outstanding members come from the following groups, so if you wanted to get involved. We have DFI's Code and Standards Committee, the DFI Otter Cast Committee, DFI Helical Committee, the ADSC Drilled Shaft Committee, ADSC's Micropile Committee, and the PDCA Driven Pile Technical Committee team. This 1810 Geo Coalition Code Committee has actually received and approved last year 6 of the IBC changes, and actually starting tomorrow is walking in with 17 brand new changes to best represent us. This is sort of an odd partnership with the group that I listed, being that many people have their own way of thinking through these things, but what most of us would think is competitive methods. is ready to take on more challenges as they continue to find, again, DFI's common ground. The best way to get involved with these specific projects is to actually join in with any of these DFI committees, the PDCA and the ADSC. If you're interested in getting more involved and understanding more about these committees and the impacts they have on our industry and the codes that are out there, please feel free to take down somebody's email address, give them a call. Any one of those people will be more than welcome to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pollyanna. Thank you all for your perspectives. Now, if I may, I'd like to open the floor for questions. Please go up to the microphone if you have a question so that we can engage everyone. Oh, we have a question from the internet that's coming.
Yes, Sarah Gay from British Columbia, Canada, asks, Mark Gates, that you mentioned constructability review, where designers come in and discuss their project to determine if it is constructible. You mentioned at the end that as part of the AG review, there is no discussion of specific contracts. Aren't the two in conflict? Or maybe better explain how that works.
Does this work? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the question. So that discussion all happens before we actually turn a design into a construction contract. So we do lots of reviews like that, both internal as well as external. So we have free reign to have lots of discussion pre-contract with industry groups. Once it becomes a construction contract and is advertised for bid, from that point on, we would not bring something like that back to the team because that could create conflicts of interest during the bidding process. But before it is actually advertised, we have no issue having constructability reviews and modifications that happen because of the feedback we get.
Thank you, Mark. Well, I have a question, and that is to you, Silas, and that is, what priorities would the FHWA have in generating and stimulating interaction with private industry?
So is this on? Okay. So I think our strategic plan is set up specifically to encourage engagement with industry. And at the moment, some of our highest priorities, I think, are in how we are viewing sort of the future of the discipline. And so we have just initiated, for instance, something called the A game. It's out of our Everyday Counts grouping. So we are looking at changing the way that the discipline thinks about site characterization. We have an enormous effort going on. It's still at its infancy, but we will be spending a lot of time in that geotechnical asset management and performance management. That also includes such things as getting a better handle on our data problems in the industry, as well as material deterioration problems in the industry. And then finally, our need to catch up with some of the evolutions in construction practice. In the last 2 decades, we've gone from, if you look at drilled shafts as an example, building as a standard a 4-foot diameter, 100-foot deep drilled shafts, to being able to do things that are 15, 16 feet in diameter in excess of 200 feet. That strains our ability to govern such things as materials, concrete pours, stability of excavations for that length of time, and just some of the construction means and methods that we're still trying to catch up with. So all of those, I think, are places where we're going to turn to industry for a lot of input and assistance in trying to solve problems that right now appear much more difficult and complex than we're ready for.
Thank you, Silas. Please go ahead.
Chuck Wright, Tishman Spire. Each project or each engineering solution always has like a cornucopia of different options. And I was wondering, maybe ask the panel, if each of the respective organizations had like some type of a formal system or some type of a methodology that you use when you're trying to determine Is it a board pile? Is it a driven pile? Is it, you know, a steel tube pile? Or, you know, there's just a solution for each one of the projects. And I don't know, do you have a formal way of trying to decide that? Because we have to do that all the time. I can't figure it out.
I think formal is a strong word, but I will say that some of our early research that was led by Jerry DiMaggio before I got to Federal Highways really focused on the early evolution from how transportation geotechnics started, which was taking steel I-beams, turning them sideways and driving them until they stopped and putting a load on them, to the idea of evaluating foundation alternatives. And so a lot of what we're doing in guidance today is trying to allow for more expansion in the types of ways that we would found or take on load at specific locations and help users understand how to go through the process of evaluating alternatives. I don't think that we've laid out any kind of step-by-step procedure for that outside of providing the alternatives and helping engineers use some form of judgment analysis and evaluation to get to a solution.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, we are a little bit behind. I'd like to thank all the panelists for all of your input and interest. I'm sorry? No, I believe we're going to. Do we have 10 more minutes? My understanding is that we're near there. So are there other questions? Well, one of the things that really came to light here, of course, in my participation in many of these organizations and from the owners, is that the owners are working extremely hard amongst themselves to educate their teams. And we, as the individual organizations, are doing the same in order to provide information and data about the products and the techniques that our members use. And that as a consulting engineer and as a contractor, we always felt that the best client we ever had was an educated client, because they understood the advantages of what it was we were delivering and how we were going to deliver them, and the quality and the control and assurance that we were going to use. And so that was something that we were always striving to do with the owners, is educate them and then elevate the level. And when we had new owners, and generally in the private sector, we found them very difficult to work with when all they cared about was low price. And so as I was interacting with these gentlemen in particular, you know, the federal groups, I was amazed at the level of internal effort and money that they were spending in bringing up the level of their people. And I think that's a big part of what brings the industry forward. And then, you know, organizations like this, where, I mean, the DFI does differ somewhat from the ADSC and the PDCA, and that we try to bring together all the disciplines for all the different methodologies and the emerging methodologies, whereas the ADSC and the PDCA, they certainly have targeted methodologies that they're trying to promote. But there's huge benefit in the unbridled enthusiasm that they bring to promoting their specific technologies. Because again, it's based on educating people about what they do, making sure that their members are providing the best quality product that they possibly can, and assuring that there's QA and QC in place, that is maintained, and that level is always being elevated. And then you, the owners, are the benefit of that, and of course we, the consumers, are the benefits as our million miles of roads are safe. So then if there are no more questions or comments, then I'd like to thank Dominic for a fantastic morning session. There were, the level of excellence of the speakers was phenomenal, and it was diverse. So extremely well done, and thank you. And thank you to Samuel. That was, as I said, decades of acumen packed into 1 hour, and so we appreciate that, and I thank you for that. And thank you to the panelists for your enthusiasm and your thoughts. So if there's nothing more, I'll close the morning session. I think we are moving off to lunch, and I don't know where that is. It's over there. It's next door. It's next door. Thanks very much.
Okay, hello everybody. This is Mary Ellen again from DFI. I'm just thanking all the people that joined us from on the webinar. Thanks for you'll get another notice from us with a link to this recording, PDH certificates in about 3 weeks. So thanks again for joining us.